Yo, what is up? You have found We Like the Blazers. I am Brandon Golder, and with me as always, it is the one, the only, the on my screen cartoonified Ryan Whitledge. Ryan, what's up, man?
Hey, somebody spent a lot of money on that cartoon, and it's the best picture of me that I have in existence right now. So I'm going to rock it and get every use out of it that I possibly can.
We are, of course, talking about Ryan's avatar on Twitter, also being used on his avatar for Google Meets. Yeah, it was someone on Blazers Twitter whose partner did these, photo illustrations. You send them a photo, and they would do like they would block it out and do like a solid color illustration. They do look good. They do look good. I have to say, the only critique I have of yours is you really got to zoom in a little bit because you can see that horizontal line cutting off the bottom. You need to zoom in so the circle is just encompasses all of you. But leaving that aside, we are not here to talk about avatars. We are here to talk about the 9-3 Portland Trailblazers. I'm just going to cut the crap. Ryan, how are you feeling about this team right now?
It's sad that he left Twitter, but I was trying to call somebody out. I think it was Terry, diehard, because he kept saying that I was the most irrationally patient Blazer fan for not jumping on the why haven't they done more bandwagon before the season started. So I tried to hop on and ask him if my patience was still irrational at this point for seeing how Cronin was doing with his roster building.
You mean die mad?
Wait, say die hard?
Yeah, you said that last episode too. I didn't call you on it. He is still on Twitter, my friend. He is at playist_4247. That's KJ. He's an often participant of the post-game Twitter Spaces set up by Sheriff of PDX and frequented by me and by Damian Lillard.
Go find his last tweet. He bailed on the 27th.
Did he really?
He did. Due to new ownership.
That is weird. That's bizarre. Okay. I did not know that.
On this, because I do have a question on this. So because there is so much, I'm not going to leave Twitter. It's fine. I don't necessarily have negative experiences, but then again, I have my crap very curated. But if and when, Twitter were to just disappear from the internet landscape, where would you go for your basketball stuff? What would you do during games? Because that's the weird thing I was thinking about. If just everything, or if you lost access to all your features or whatnot, you couldn't send messages, or if it became a solely subscription-based service, I was I'm not going to pay $8 a month for that. That's stupid. But I have met and become friends and communicate with so many different people on Twitter and in Twitter messages that I'm I couldn't contact half the people that I know to talk basketball to.
I agree. The only reason why this podcast exists is because of Twitter. The only reason why my previous podcast existed was because of Twitter. The only reason I got involved with Blazers Edge in the first place was because of Twitter. My Blazers experience as an adult has been through Twitter. And actually, before we get to the Blazers, let's talk about this. We have Twitter being bought by Elon Musk, which, by the way, sounds like a 17th century perfume of some sort. It's probably been rancid for 100 years. And this dude comes in, fake genius, a lot of people admire him, whatever, has taken companies that have existed in the past and has taken credit for their success. Maybe he's done a thing or two strategically fine. I think probably one of the most overrated people in American society. We're going to leave that aside. Comes in, waters down the Twitter verified account process. Now you have people with blue check marks impersonating Woj and Shams Charania, and people like George W. Bush, and pharmaceutical companies saying that insulin is now free. So you have this huge problem. People
have stock by billions today.
Right. It has real world implications. You have advertisers running away from Twitter as fast as they can. It's actually incredible that someone could come in and, because of just a little bit of ego, a little bit of hubris, and a lot of power, can have this much of a negative impact on this platform so quickly. It does surprise me. I'm a little disgusted by it. To answer your question, Ryan, I don't know where I'd go. I don't know what I'd do. I love Blazers Twitter. That's where that's my spot. That's my home. Especially moving across the world, I feel like I can take a piece of myself with me by still interacting with people during game days. I don't know, man. Maybe you and I should create our own social network. or maybe someone else should get on it. But yeah, it's dark days right now on Twitter.
Yeah, just point us towards the banks that loan him all the money so that when he heavily leveraged Tesla, they can give us something. We can come up with an idea. No, I just find it fascinating just watching it. I real quick, I had read this article and it was, hey, someone forward this to Elon Musk because it's the speed run of how to make it through content moderation for social media companies. And he went through like the history of like every barrier that social media companies have come up against that landed at everybody at about what they're at today. And it was up there for a day and a half, and through all the mistakes and changes that he had made, he was like, wow, I've never seen somebody hit all these steps so quickly and all the fuck ups.
I do think what you just said, I think is interesting, that there are things about the way companies work and as a public servant, the way governments work, which are clunky, which are kind of annoying, which we're, pissed off about. And some of those things absolutely need to change. Some of those things, as you just said, have been shaped and molded and informed by years of trial and error, by years and years of user testing and, case use examples of this doesn't work, so we're going to do this, and then that kind of mess ups, we're going to adapt this way, and then some dude just comes in like, I bet I could do it better. It's like, no, you can't. Like, yeah, I mean, yes, Twitter can be improved, but I love your point is like, yeah, like the reason why we have moderation and the reason why we have checks and balances on this stuff is for exactly what happened over like a 3-day period. Anyway, all of that being said,
my other quick favorite part is that for as much complaining as people want to do on either side of what the argument for content moderation, free
either
speech,
side
whatever,
of the Twitter aisle.
Yes, either side of the internet debate and discourse is that everybody. It's funny to me. I never realized that people were thinking of these things, these social media companies, these platforms, and all that, in terms of just the country in which they live, and not the fact that these are worldwide services. And so these places have to find the happy medium that appeases all countries.
No, it's true. I mean, it's yeah, and obviously this is a huge conversation for a different day. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, my last kind of word on this Elon Musk Twitter stuff is like, I just don't have a lot of patience for people who have a highly inflated sense of self. And that's clearly what that dude is. That's fine, right? Like, he's got a lot of money, got a lot of power. That's fine. He'll do what he wants with it.
Well, this sucks, because now we can't be friends anymore.
We can still be friends. I think that the way this probably ends Twitter-wise is that probably going to file for bankruptcy. I mean, the dude, first of all, why am I still talking about this? I think someone else is going to own Twitter at some point, hopefully not too distant future. Anyway, let us now talk about the Blazers. There's a lot to talk about. As I said, I mean, I just wanted to kind of open it up, and you began answering it. And I took us off on a Twitter tangent because we were talking about how Dymad is no longer on Twitter, which again, that shocked me. Like, I didn't realize that. Like, KJ, please come back. But yeah, how do you feel about this team? You got the comment that maybe you're being like overly optimistic, or what was the phrasing that you used?
It was irrationally patient.
Irrationally patient. So yeah, I mean, how do you feel about this team? Like, what's your top level? Like, if you're someone who didn't really know basketball, or maybe was a fan a long time ago, hey, how are the Blazers doing? How do you feel about them? What would your response be?
This may be like the best, I don't want to say collection of talent, because it's like, if you look at a lot of these names on paper, you're kind of like, okay, I can get it. And that's what we did all off season. We're like, well, we'll see how it meshes. Well, it's meshing great. And like, I'm not going to lie, like my level of excitement is the same level of excitement that I had watching the 2000 squad. And there's just something there. Like this is the kind of like chemistry, camaraderie, we're going to play for all the other guys, unselfish kind of style basketball, grit and grind stuff that I kind of thought that the guys last year would have when I was taking all that time to like preach, like, oh, look at this roster balance that they have. Look at this. I know they had, three guards starting, but I mean, you could technically argue that's a case for what they're still doing right now. But, look at the difference between this year and last year. I'm just amazed that I didn't doubt that the plan would work, but I didn't necessarily think that it would come together as quickly as it has so far.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, just to answer my own question, I kind of am with you. Like, it's hard for me to remember the last time I felt this excited and optimistic about the Blazers. I think for me, it wouldn't be as far back as you went, but for me, it would probably be the Batum, Wes Matthews, LaMarcus Aldridge, Damian Lillard, Robin Lopez, before Matthews got hurt, that 2015 team, which had a larger sample size than this year's team and was a legitimate NBA contender. I mean, you also had that they had been playing together for a couple of years. There's some familiarity there. Like the style of basketball being played in 2015 is different than what's being played today. That was probably the last time I felt this optimistic, but there's like an extra something else that I feel that it feels, I mean, I hate to get too optimistic or to get too hopeful, but it feels special. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's probably the most apt word to use, because it just there is something special about this team. You look at their point differential. I mean, they're not all that great. I want to say like they have the 7th or 8th, best point differential or whatnot in the league right now, but we're seeing it in these, they're digging themselves into holes, sloppy turnovers, excluding last night's game, but there's zero quit. It's like they don't care about the scoreboard until the final minute, and they're just imposing their will on people. I mean, like, I'm just trying to think of like what my mentality would have been like 2 years ago if you would have told me, oh, hey, Dame's out, Sharpe's out, commemorative or comparative. There we go. Comparative players, no starting point, no all-star starting point guard, no starting center. You just lost your 6th man and you're going in against a fully healthy, legit Western Conference playoff team. How are you feeling about it? I'm like, we're getting our ass kicked by 20. And then you watch them just destroy the Pelicans last night.
Yeah. And you mentioned their net rating, and earlier in the season it wasn't so hot compared to the record. And to your point, they are. I just had it up too. They're 8th in the league right now. Their net rating is 2.5, which is the average is that they're scoring 2.5 points more than their opponents. They have had 4 games this season which came down to the wire. I mean, those 4 games being like kind of what's set the flavor has been like the spice that has come through in the dish that is the 2022-23 season for the Blazers so far, are these late game heroics coming from people other than Damian Lillard. And like, yes, like they have had close games, but they've played 12 games. They're 9-3. Yeah, those were 4 of those games were very close, but I think there's a narrative a little bit early on. Well, they're being buoyed by the fact that they've gotten some luck down the stretch. You could look at it that way. You could also say, to your point, it's not luck down the stretch. There's something else. Call it cohesiveness, call it connectivity. I'd like to talk about Damian Lillard and his leadership, which is like, I mean, if you didn't know that Damian Lillard was like one of the best leaders in the NBA before, you damn well better know it now. But yeah, I mean, this team does have something about it, which is extremely exciting. And we can get into some numbers and talk more about that in a second, but just, I mean, look at what they've done on the road. They've had such a tough schedule, man. I mean, they've been on the road for what seems like forever. Don't they have the NBA's best road record at this point or something close to it?
If it's not first, I want to say it's second. And then, at this point in time last year, the Blazers didn't record their 4th road win until January.
Yeah, they're the only team in the NBA that only has 1 road loss. They're 6-1 on the road. So the NBA's best road record. But yeah, which is so there's so many different places we can go with this. Go for it. Sorry.
I got a couple of little things listed. Do you want to talk about the fact that, when the schedule came out, we were all looking at it going, oh my God, that first month and a half, 2 months of the season is absolutely brutal. It doesn't lighten up until about January. If maybe, hopefully they can just go 500 through that, those first 20 games, maybe we'll see if they're, they might be able to find what they need to trade. Or you can talk about the fact that, even with Damian Lillard being the best leader that we've seen, especially with this group of guys, is that the Blazers are 3-2 without him. And yes, they're 9-3, but that's 12 games. They've played almost half of them without their all-star superstar point guard. Right. We're starting games with Justice Winslow at point. Right. So, there's the fact that, Jeremy Grant has found his niche, I think I'll steal it from Danny, his Goldilocks zone, that he's not getting asked to do too much, but he's not getting asked to do too little. And he has the perfect engagement amount to where he's like, he's the Alfred to the Batman and Robin of Damon Ant here. So I don't know. Those are my three interesting topics. Which one you want to pick on first?
I think let's talk about the schedule. I'll just say a couple quick table setting things. The last time that we recorded, I kind of fudged it a little bit because when we recorded, they were 4-1. By the time I posted, they were 5-1. And so I put that in the title of the podcast. Oops. So since then, they have gone 4-2. Losses against the Grizzlies and the Suns, completely understandable. Wins against those same Suns, the Heat, the Hornets, and then, like you said, yesterday or a couple days, yesterday against the Pelicans. By the way, the Blazers have taken the season series from the Phoenix Suns because they have already played their 3 games against them, which,
that's
depending
nuts.
on how well the Suns do that. Yeah, it's nuts. And also that might come in handy later, especially considering who was playing on that first game against the Suns. Anyway, but then to your point about the schedule, there are some things that we know about NBA teams now that we didn't know at the beginning of the season. We didn't know how dysfunctional the Brooklyn Nets would be. They play them in a couple games. Actually play them a couple different times. We didn't know just how bad the Lakers would be. They've already faced them once. They're going to face them again at the end of the month.
Check the tape. I called them trash. I said they were trash. Check the tape, and you remember that.
The second worst team in the league. Okay, fine, whatever.
I called them trash.
Okay, fine. And they're trash. So you went on that front. We didn't know that the Timberwolves would either take this long to get started and get cohesive, or that we didn't know they were just going to be this bad. It depends if you want to take an optimistic view on them, incorporating Rudy Gobert.
I think in that same Lakers take, I called the Timberwolves out too.
Oh, did you really? Oh, that's funny. But on the same token, we also didn't know just how good the Utah Jazz would be. The Blazers do face them a couple times in the next few weeks. We didn't know that we didn't know that the Cavaliers would be like one of the NBA's best teams. So there's some give and take, I think, with the schedule as it's coming up. But they are ending this road trip, and then they do get 3 games at home. Their last game on the road against Dallas, and then they play at home against the Spurs, against the Nets, against the Jazz. I would argue all 4 of those games are gettable. But I mean, if you can even split those games, I think it's completely fine. They could win all 4. But yeah, so that's a little bit of the schedule coming up. But is there anything that you wanted to hit on specifically with either the schedule they've had thus far or the schedule that they're going to be facing?
Well, it's funny, just thinking of the schedule, like you just said, if they can get a split on those 4, go 2-2. Meanwhile, I'm thinking back to before they went on this road trip, and everybody and their brother is saying, if they can just split the road trip, go 3-3, that's considered a successful road trip. So if we just keep setting this benchmark of a 50% expectation, and you think they'll just keep stepping over it? It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, and there's something that when you're looking at this team that you have to think about. I mean, first of all, the strength of schedule, I'm just looking here at basketballreference.com.
5th hardest.
What's that?
I believe they have the 5th toughest strength of schedule of games played so far in the season.
I believe you. What I'm seeing says 9th, but at any rate, it's up in the upper third at least, right? But something that you have to think about with this team as you're watching it and as you're looking through their stats, there isn't a lot about this team that's unsustainable. There's not a lot about what the Blazers are doing that is just going to collapse like a souffle overbaked in the oven. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it. Like, they've been missing games with Damian Lillard and with Anthony Simons. They missed games with key players like Shaedon Sharpe, and they have come out on top anyway. They're turning the ball over like crazy. The Blazers are very close to dead last. They're actually 29th in turnover percentage. There's stuff that they can clean up there. The shooting is not unsustainable. It makes me wonder, is it that the Blazers may have somewhere to fall, or could the Blazers potentially get even better?
I think they can get better because all the stuff that they're doing right isn't fluky, and all the stuff that they're doing wrong is correctable. Right. It's one thing to think about, like, of years past when the things that they were doing wrong was playing just horrific defense. And it's really hard to say, well, if they can just correct the defense, because there's so much that goes into that. But now we're starting to look at the flaws or some of the warts of this team, and the big one that jumps out is turnovers. That's something that is easily correctable. Not like them just flipping a switch in their head and saying, you know what, I'll stop giving the ball to the other team. But it's kind of, the more they play, the more they get that familiarity, all that stuff. Turnovers will tend to go down. One thing that's shocked me a little bit is they don't appear, for as much as they get to the line, they aren't necessarily that good right now of a free throw shooting team. And one of the biggest outliers that I've noticed with that, like, I think he's still shooting in the high 80%, but Dame's free throws just seem off. And so it's like these tiny little nitpicky things outside of the turnovers. That's a big nitpicky thing. But these other tiny little issues, they're all correctable. And a lot of it's correctable with getting in a rhythm. I want to say the Blazers right now are ranked 7th overall in defense, but like 17th in offense. And we've never worried about their offense. So if they can keep this up on the defensive end and, even sprinkle in a little bit more, we might be looking at a top 10 in both categories team. And I don't think any of us thought we'd be seeing that this year.
That's the thing, is that their offense has been, by the numbers, has been pretty pedestrian, like you just said. And depending on who you ask, Ryan, this blew me away. Their defensive rating is actually 5th or 6th, depending on who you ask. But they're holding opponents to 106 points per game. That's 3rd in the league. And it was like, I knew that when Chauncey Billups came in last year, it was like, we're going to hang our hat on defense and blah, blah, blah. And then you saw everything fall apart pretty quickly, first with the vets and then with Dame getting injured. And even through the preseason, it was like, I don't see any improvement with their defense. I don't know what happened between the last preseason game and the first regular season game. Were they just tricking us? Like, were they just not trying and they knew they could flip that switch? Because this team looks like they've been playing together for a hell of a lot longer than like 10, 12 games. Right. And like,
I think I mentioned it last episode, but it was Chauncey was trying to institute his stuff, but he was making it way too complicated. And so he said he had to not go back to the drawing board, but he really had to dumb it down and try to just get the basics with the guys and then build from there as they succeeded. So I think you may be seeing part of that is he went back to the basics of, hey, just do this. Let's just keep it at this. Let's run this little scheme. Let's run this. And then as they work and guys can see it in live action, live fire, for lack of a better term, then he's able to, okay. And so this is why when I was having you do this is why I want you to be looking here. This is why, and he's just building that kind of stuff. That's the impression I get.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take on it. And I do want to also give Chauncey Billups credit. I mean, something else that he's been doing is he's sort of been weaving in particularly on offense, which again, the offense is kind of pedestrian, but whatever. He's been letting players do what they like to do in addition to doing what he wants them to do. And I think he's been doing a really good job of balancing those two things out and keeping people engaged. I mean, look, like the only 2 players in the starting lineup who have any significant time playing together in that role, it's Dame and Nurk. And again, as with many players on this team, Nurk has had his games where he hasn't been playing. And it's shocking to me. I don't know if it's just like they have a ton of wings and that just like now you can just magically play a lot better and things are more cohesive and I don't know, things are steadier, but man, I don't know. Like it's been a lot of fun.
The other thing that stands out to me with him is that he seems to very much coach by feel. And I'm thinking, he was such a good point guard and such a good floor general that I'm wondering if his experience and the level at which he played when he was a player, like how the game slows down and how you can see the game. And if that has carried over more than maybe people were thinking to give it credit for in that. I mean, like he's got some weird lineups in for some extended periods of time because he's just like, no, that group's got it. They're vibing right now. I'm gonna roll with those vibes. They'll get us here, And so I don't know what to attribute that to. I mean, that's one of our big complaints about Stotts of years ago, and I hate trying to make Stotts did this, but Chauncey's doing this. But one of our big complaints, and I think everybody had it, was that Stotts was very rigid in his rotations. You could set your watch to when guys were coming in and going out.
Super rigid. Yeah.
And so we're not seeing that with Chauncey. He's doing a great job. Yeah.
I have to say, though, it's interesting to me that, again, for all the criticism that I thought was warranted that Chauncey Billups got last year, I wasn't expecting him to be as flexible as he's being. I mean, I wrote tons of times on Twitter and I created an article about it that like part of Chauncey Billups wants to be a good coach is that he just simply has to be more flexible. He has to recognize who his players are and let them play they want to play, at least in part. That's exactly what he's doing. And to your point too, like, yeah, he is taking the temperature of the game and rolling with it. And it's just been working and so much of this too, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about it, would be Damian Lillard's leadership. And there's a lot of different ways to define leadership. And the thing that comes to mind for me that Dame has talked about, but what you really see happening on the court more strongly than I've ever seen it, is that he's allowing other people to shine. He's getting out of the way and letting other people cook. He is like tapping other people's wrists in post games for people, Jeremy Grant, Josh Hart, who get game winners. And he's like, it's Grant time. It's Hart time. Like, have you ever seen someone more joyous to see other people succeed than Damian Lillard? Like, I haven't. It's pretty remarkable.
And then even more so in that trust thing, there's not necessarily reporting, but it's been kind of spoken about through things that I've heard locally, radio and interviews and those kind of things. But like, Dame sat out, they rested him last night. He apparently wasn't necessarily happy about it. But in years past, he hasn't been able to be talked into taking those nights off because he's had that burden or had that feeling, for lack of a better term, probably. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's just outsider's observation of that he needed to do more to carry the team. And so besides having that trust in his guys on the court, he's having that trust in them to, you guys can go out there and win. You can get this shit done. You're not going to need me to die out on that court for 82 games a year. So right. that level of trust. And, when teammates see that from their leader, from their superstar player, that then fills that even more confidence up. Hey, he's got me. I got him. He's trusting me to go get this done. I'm going to go get it done for him. And it all just builds on itself.
And you see that in the way Anthony Simons has been playing. I mean, the last game against the Pelicans, Anthony Simons never has lacked for confidence, but he is looking so incredibly confident in his shot. It allows people, you said earlier about Jeremy Grant being kind of in the perfect situation for him. He's not overburdened, but he also has plenty to do if he can step into that role. He looks extremely comfortable. Talking about like letting other people shine. And again, like I'm not trying to make this just a pro Chauncey Billups podcast because man, if I talk shit about that guy quite a bit.
Yeah, I think we need a couple more pro Chauncey podcasts too, so you can get back to a neutral baseline here.
Hey, I sometimes I really like being wrong, and oh my God, do I look wrong about Chauncey Billups and his coaching? Because frankly, he looks like a good coach, which is great. But speaking about letting other people shine, Shaedon Sharpe, a rookie, and again, not to contrast always with Terry Stotts, but look, actually, just really quick, just to put the pin in this, we've only seen the Blazers with exactly 2 head coaches over the last decade. So I think it's perfectly natural that we're going to compare the current coach to the previous coach who was in his position for 9 years, the second most winningest coach in franchise history. I think that comparisons to Terry Stotts are natural, and I will allow it. But Shaedon Sharpe getting the run that he has, and they did, whatever bit of news, you've already heard it, but Shaedon Sharpe was diagnosed with a fractured finger, but he is like game to game. He can play with that. We had Jeff Stotts, not related to Terry, at In Street Clothes, who's kind of the NBA's foremost expert on injury, talking about what that fracture is. It's called a volar avulsion fracture. It's like a little cartilage piece in the joint of your finger. And sometimes if you bend it backwards, if you hyperextend your finger, a piece of it can come off. And basically the only other 2 players he had in his database who've ever suffered this injury are Kobe Bryant and Anthony Davis, and neither of them missed any time whatsoever. So that's good news.
Yeah, isn't that the one where we saw Kobe just tape his 2 fingers together? I believe that was exactly. It. Yeah,
that's right. So. Yeah. So it's quite
one
possible.
More feather in the cap for a Kobe comparison for Shaedon.
My only kind of thing that's kind of a bummer about this, and it's Shaedon Sharpe's 5th finger, which I think is his pinky. It is on his right hand. That kind of sucks. But yes, he can play through it. But I want to see him continue to dunk the way he's dunking. But I did want to ask you specifically about Sharpe and specifically about players having runway to shine and to progress. Is Shaedon Sharpe the Blazers' 6th man at this point? Is that how you'd categorize him?
I was leaning that way for once we realized that he was going to be getting, 17-ish minutes, 20-ish minutes a night. I was leaning that way, but then Chauncey's gone about and switched up his rotations. And, we've seen games where Keon Johnson's the first guy off the bench, or, I think in the sense of the most productive bench person, yes, he is. But as far as if you want to talk like rotational first guy off the bench, dedicated, like he will be the first one in, I don't know if he is.
Okay, that's fair. Would you say, is Shaedon Sharpe the Blazers' most important player off the bench at this point? Do you think he's earned that?
Ooh, that one I will go with a solid no, Bob. I would think that that label goes firmly to Justice Winslow. He is the Blazer. He is, to me, he is the Blazers' Swiss Army knife. He has been, like I mentioned earlier, he's been a starting point guard for us, and he's been a backup center. Like, that man has run the gambit for this team, and he is just, his box score isn't necessarily jumping off the page at you at all nights, but he is doing everything that this team needs at the time it needs it. So for me, he would be the most important and most impactful bench player, but that's
fair. No, I think that's fair. I would tend to agree, although the explosion that he provides, the vertical spacing he provides, frankly, the shooting that he's been providing already so far as a rookie, as someone who didn't even play any college, I think Sharpe is close to the Blazers' most important player off the bench, and I would not be shocked if he took that mantle before the end of the season. And look, I know that we both love to give credit to Mike Richmond of the Locked On Blazers podcast on this podcast.
Our podcast is just a commercial for Mike Richmond's podcast, yes.
Exactly. At some point, David Locke has got to start paying us some money for this. But I remember exactly where I was when I was listening to part of Mike's comprehensive preseason assessment of the Portland Trail Blazers. I was washing my car in my mother-in-law's driveway in Seattle, and I remember so well talking about Shaedon Sharpe, and I was listening very intently. And the gist of Mike's message was, it's going to be completely okay if Shaedon Sharpe doesn't earn his way onto the court. That doesn't mean he's not developing. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be a good player. Nobody should panic. It'll be completely okay and probably expected if Shaedon Sharpe doesn't play. Not only is Shaedon Sharpe playing, he's become, we are having a conversation, Ryan, about whether he's the most important player off their bench, and we're not laughing that idea out of the room. That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, seriously, like, and I respect Mike, and I think his analysis was completely spot on. I think what this has to do with was Shaedon Sharpe stepping into this role in a way that I did not anticipate. I mean, did you see this coming? I didn't.
I did not know. And I mean, even to go to the point of, like, you know, tooting Chauncey's horn for, you know, Ricky's getting run and him letting Shaedon go, you know, Jabari Walker's getting meaningful minutes. He's getting impactful minutes in games. I mean, again, go back to a Stotts era. When was the last time you saw the 57th overall pick get meaningful minutes under that decade?
Right. Yeah. It's wild. I mean, this whole season's been wild. There are a lot of places that we could go with it. Since I'm running with no notes, I don't know if you have anything in front of you. Is there anywhere else you wanted to take this conversation besides us being really giddy and super excited by how good this team looks?
I think so. I mean, we're all shocked and surprised with how the Blazers are doing. Obviously, this is a Blazers related podcast, but I think I wanted to ask you, because for me, this has been such a weird and fascinating start to the NBA season because, you know, as you had mentioned earlier, you know, Lakers, you know, being like crap, you know, for me, it's pretty much the only, like, top tier team that's performing up to expectations is the Bucks. But what's your most surprising thing? What's the thing that surprises you the most so far, you know, 12 to 15 games total into the NBA season out of the entire league?
Oh, I think you know what I'm going to answer. And I hope it should be your answer too.
We'll see. That's why I asked you first. I can adjust my answer on the fly. I'm putting you on the spot.
If we're taking the Blazers out of it, and I think the Blazers would frankly be like a close second or third. The Blazers are definitely in the tier one of most surprising teams, and definitely tier one most pleasantly surprising. It's the Utah Jazz. It's the 10-3 Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz, who has a 6.1 point differential. The Utah Jazz, where Jordan Clarkson suddenly looks like a completely different player, where Lauri Markkanen looks like a legitimate all-star player out of nowhere, where Kelly Olynyk looks completely functional, where Mike Conley seems to have found the fountain of youth. And with a coach who has no experience whatsoever, has his team playing probably the exact opposite of the way that Danny Ainge wanted them to be playing when he shipped off.
Is Danny Ainge pulling out all his hair?
Whatever hair he has left. To me, it's the Jazz, and it's kind of the same way with the Blazers, although I would say the Jazz more surprising. They just look like a good team. I mean, do they look like a 10-3 team moving forward? No, they're not going to end the season, whatever that would extrapolate to. Like, they're not going to end the season 60 and, you know, I can't do math, 16-22. It's not going to happen. But they look really, really good. It's really fun to see. It's going to be sad when they inevitably make a trade in order to tank a little bit harder. I cannot imagine this team leaning into this success, although they have so many assets in future years. And frankly, the chances of getting Victor Wembanyama are so small that maybe they do think that. So anyway, for me, it's a long answer. I'm sorry. To me, it's the Utah Jazz, probably followed closely by the Blazers and the Cavs for most surprising.
Yeah, it's hands down. It's the Jazz for me. And one of the things that, and it ties in with the Blazers and their roster construction, but with how the Jazz are playing and how you're seeing other teams falter. For me, like, the Jazz are the most surprising team, but the most surprising narrative for me is this the official end of super teams? Are we now fully in a proof of concept that just because you have three all-stars on your team that you're guaranteed to win? Like, the Blazers are helping prove that you don't need to build a team full of all-stars. The Jazz definitely are, and in regards to, like, if they're ever going to try to pull the plug to tank, do they need to, or do they just need to keep a watchful eye on how Minnesota's doing? Because they have a lot of Minnesota's draft picks. So they don't necessarily need to tank for themselves. If the team that they just took all their picks from to trade one of their superstar players to does the tanking for them. If you can develop a winning culture while also knowing that you're going to get a lottery pick from another team, that's fantastic. So
yeah,
no, for me, it's the Jazz, and that's a 1A. The 1B is this now the official death nail of the super teams?
I want to pick on that one because I don't think it's the death. I don't think it's the death knell for super teams whatsoever. I don't buy that at all. I mean, first of all, you have to just, look at the teams in the NBA. I mean, how many of the teams in the NBA are qualified as either a super team or like was supposed to be a super team? I mean, we're talking about the Clippers probably, right?
Yep.
We're talking about the Nets. Maybe you throw the Lakers in there.
Nope, they fully count. If you would have told anybody 3 years ago that, if you would have told anybody 3 years ago that a team with Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis, they would have been like, "Why are they playing games? Like, just have the Western Conference Finals between them and the Warriors, and they can play whoever from the East."
Right. No, I agree with that. Okay, so. And then you have, would you qualify the 76ers with Embiid and Harden? I probably would. I mean, that's Daryl Morey's MO.
Yeah, I'd throw them in there.
76ers.
Also up for consideration. Oh, damn it. Why? I literally just had another team on the top of my head and I completely effing blanked on it. No. Okay. We'll keep the list.
Would you put the Warriors in there? I think that's it's okay. I think
their general core from their massive dynasty in which they literally had a lineup that was called the Death Lineup is still there.
Yeah, the only thing about the Warriors is like the way they're constructed is similar to how they've drafted. And to me, like super team means that you've built a team with, just top talent and who gives a shit about anything else, like trade all your draft picks, but whatever, like the way they're constructed is sort of like a super team. So
they have the NBA's most expensive payroll. I think we can earmark them in there when they're paying, about $500 million when all's said and done.
That's fair. So
they're the Yankees of the NBA.
We're not even going to get into the differences between how salary caps or the non-existence of them work between baseball and the NBA because it's completely different. There's so much more parity and so much more equality between teams in the NBA. It's not even funny, but that's a show for another day. Of all the teams we just mentioned that we think are super teams, the one who's doing the best are the Clippers at 7-5. So I think that, it provides ammunition to your point that like kind of the concept of the super team is dead. I think where I would say is that there is a very strong comeback of the non-super team. I don't think that's the same as super teams are dead. I still believe very strongly that talent wins out in the NBA. And I also believe pretty strongly that if you asked any NBA GM, if you said, you can have Giannis and the team that he has, or you can have Giannis and pick two other players and then flotsam, I think that they'd pick Giannis and the 2 stars. I just think that's how most NBA GMs work. So I don't think the super team is dead. I think it's kind of slumbering, hibernating right now. There's a lot of confluences of weird stuff that's been happening to push some of those teams down, including Kyrie Irving being a complete fucking idiot. But we're going to leave that aside.
Hey, he met with Silver. He's good now.
Oh, God. I will say this, though. The fact that the non-super teams are having such a renaissance year bodes very well for the Portland Trailblazers that have always seemed to be just a little bit off in their timing, whether it's when they had a ton of cap space in the summer of 16, literally every other team did. Oh, God. I have to be right back. Sorry. You're being recorded. I don't know what we're talking about. Our cat escaped our house and had to cut the recording immediately, and couldn't find him. Went up and down the block, couldn't find him, and then Cassie had the idea to have this like vacant lot thing behind her house in tall grass, and she's like, "What if he's there?" And she found him. Anyway, that was pretty stressful, man. But he's in the house and he's all good. I don't remember what we were talking about, but we definitely talked about the Blazers, and I'm still happy about them. But with me saying all those words, did that jog your memory about where we were?
We were talking about surprise storylines and death of super teams. I think that's where we left off.
Thank you.
And you were going on a rant about how I was horribly wrong. No.
Not that you were wrong. I remember, I'll finish my point briefly to say that the Blazers have always been off with their timing a little bit, whether it's when they had cap space or just the style of play, passing Terry Stotts by a little bit, and he's a stubborn man and didn't really adapt. It feels like with non-super teams flourishing this year, it is a very good time for the Blazers to have a solid non-super team. So if this trend continues, it could be the Blazers find themselves a little bit like, even beyond how well they're playing, the dynamics of the NBA are lending themselves to potentially them doing really well this year. So that's a good thing. That was fun.
I agree. And I think we've reached the end of my notes. So unless there's anything else that you want to throw in there.
So, okay. Cat escapes, blank for 10, 15 minutes, come back and end on that. It's a great way to end. I love it. Actually, let's just really quick, let's be really explicit about what the Blazers' upcoming schedule is. And maybe, I don't know, predictions seem
Is Lucas still on his 30-point-a-game streak?
It was broken, I think, last game.
Damn it.
I know. Darn. So, because the Blazers, I'm sure this is why I brought it, they play the Mavericks tomorrow. They then have a couple days off, and they come back home to take on the Spurs, the Nets, and the Jazz, and that's all happening between tomorrow and a week from tomorrow. So away against the Mavericks and at home against the Spurs, the Nets, the Jazz. Let's do predictions. Ryan, what is your prediction for the Blazers during this 4-game stretch?
During the 4-game stretch?
Just those 4 games.
I'll give them a 3-1.
Which one's going to be the loss?
I think it'll be the Nets because I believe Kyrie will still be suspended by then. I think his minimum 5-game or whatever. I don't know if he'll have met the requirements, but I think he'll still be suspended by then. And if he is, the Kyrie-less Nets play a hell of a lot better. Turns out that if you just put 4 dudes and Kevin Durant on the court, that's somehow a significantly better team than Kevin Durant's Kyrie Irving and 3 other dudes. So
that's what we call addition by subtraction.
So yes, I want to say 3-1. Other than that, in all honesty, my gut really wants to say 2-2, but I'm gonna go join your optimistic train here and go 3-1.
I'm going to say 3-1, and I'm actually going to say the loss comes tomorrow against the Mavericks, is my guess. It's on the road. Game will be back, but, they have to lose sometime. And I like them against the Spurs at home. I like them against the Nets at home, and I like that Jazz-Blazers game being a really interesting, tough, hard-fought game, which I think the Blazers may win. So, we're both going 3-1. If they do that, that would put the Blazers at 12-4, which would be quite a sight to behold. But in the meantime, they're 9-3, and we are stoked. And we're also stoked that you all joined us for another episode of We Like the Blazers. You can find us always at WeLikeTheBlazers.com or at Like the Blazers on Twitter. We're also at WeLikeTheBlazers@gmail.com. And I'm Brandon. You can find me at Global PDX. That is Ryan. You can find him at The Witty Ryan. And until next time, we appreciate you all. And go Blazers.
Go Blazers. And go, Brandon, and find an AC unit.
I'm sweating. Sweat. But that's okay. It's okay to sweat. Nothing wrong with that.